Welcome to the Naked Relationship Podcast. I'm Adam, and today we've got a very special treat. We are interviewing Brian from the Front Porch Swingers in a two-part interview series, just because the interview was a pretty long interview, and we know a lot of our audience, yourself, prefer the shorter episodes. So we split it up into two episodes. So please enjoy this episode. I'm pretty pumped about it. Brian, thank you for coming on the show again. Without further ado, here is part one. All right, so we are here with Brian from the Front Porch Swingers. How you doing, Mr. Brian?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm still cracking up over what you told me. I'm sorry. I can't.
Listen, it's a valid question, man.
Damn it. We might have to redo that.
I don't know why. It's like I said, it's a valid question.
Do you want to give some context?
Yeah, you were just you were making a ridiculous statement about why you asking Kelly what it's like to have an ugly husband. Obviously in jest, and I told you, I said I say the same thing to Brenna. Like, what is it like to have people think you're hanging out with your grandfather? I do it to her all the time.
I fucking love it, man. I'm sure most of our listeners have come from your show, or at least heard of your show. And so for those of you who haven't, Brian and Brenna are an age gap couple. And a very attractive one, might I add.
I appreciate that. So, I'm the older one. Just throw that out there.
Like the smart ass in me is like trying to refrain from making jokes, and then I'm
why would you do that?
Well, I'm thinking the jokes through, and then I'm like, well, that doesn't sound really nice. But in the back of my mind, I know it's like satirical.
You're not going to hurt my feelings, buddy. Not a chance.
Well, anyway, I mean, I don't expect to hurt your feelings. I mean, I know you're pretty tough-skinned and pretty awesome. But so this is an interview that I've wanted to have for several weeks. And so, but I didn't want to, because I didn't want you to feel like I was exploiting you in any way, especially when the news first dropped, if you will.
Sure.
And I also knew, like, as a friend, I didn't want to ask all the questions right away, because I knew that you would be answering them a million times. And for those of you who don't know, Brian, you have since come out as bisexual, and I never in the wildest dreams would I have ever thought that this was a thing, because I just never, we've never had any conversation to maybe allude to it.
Sure.
And then I think you had asked me a question in the lead up, kind of about bisexuality or something along those lines. And then a couple weeks later, I get a Snapchat from Brenna saying, hey, go listen to our other podcast, which is called
Sex on Your Terms.
Sex on Your Terms. I don't know why I was thinking relationship, but it's about relationship.
Correct.
Because you're a relationship coach, and Brenna is a sex therapist or sex coach.
Sex coach.
And you guys offer services. So you guys can find that at sexonyourterms.com, I believe.
That's correct.
And so Brenna told me to go check out that episode, and I was fucking floored. I had no fucking indication, maybe looking back, there could have been some indicators, but just from your question alone, but I never would have suspected that. It blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were probably a little surprised by it, but as you and I were talking earlier before we started recording, I think you alluded to, why we don't talk more about it or why it didn't come up before on the show. And much like I said, we don't talk a lot about Brenna's bisexuality either. It's just not a big deal to us. It's just part of who we are, So for me, I don't think it's any different from her being bisexual.
Well, that's the thing about it is we live in a world, in a sex positive world that isn't truly sex positive for the majority.
Absolutely not. I couldn't agree with you more.
Like you were saying in our before we started recording, that women are almost expected to be bisexual in the swinger community or the ethical non-monogamy, not community, but world.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more there either, because when you go on all these different swinger sites or dating apps or anything like that, probably 80 to 90% of the females or people who identify as females are bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
Probably
Absolutely.
99% of males or people who identify as male have their profile set as they're straight. And that being said, anything outside of that norm is going to be met with some sort of resistance, whether it is just people looking down on you or whatever. There's going to be that negative stigma associated with a bisexual or not straight male, which I think is bullshit.
I agree with you. We had this conversation, as you alluded to, women in the space of ethical non-monogamy, let's just call it the swinger-centric space for lack of a better term, are expected to be bisexual. Certainly it's almost assumed in many, many cases. In fact, I can only think of one particular case where Brenna and I met a couple where the female of that couple, a seemingly normal, heteronormative couple, the female was not bisexual. But when it comes to men, it's almost not even discussed. I have spoken to a lot of guys who are coupled, they're married to women, and they don't identify on their profiles as bisexual for fear that they're going to turn people off, or people are going to reject them or whatever. And the truth is, we didn't do it either in the beginning. I didn't, because for the same reason, people instantly will get these strange ideas that because you're a guy who may enjoy the company of another guy at some point, are instantly attracted to them, and that has to be part of play, which is utterly ridiculous.
Well, that kind of goes back to the whole idea of, oh, you're gay, which means you automatically find me attractive, or hey, you're a lesbian, you automatically find every single female in the world attractive.
Yes.
No, it doesn't work like that. Just because I'm straight doesn't mean that, well, I'm not straight. But if I was straight, it doesn't mean that I'm attracted to every single person. I identify as bisexual, but as we'll get into later, that might be expanding.
Sure.
But just because I'm bisexual doesn't mean that I find every single person in the world attractive. Like,
right.
A lot of people I don't. So my regular play partner on the show, we call her Anne. She is actually straight, as is her husband. But again, it's so fucking rare to find a straight female in the swinger-centric space.
Oh, I agree. As I said, we've only, I think, met one gal of a couple who was straight, 100% straight. And to be fair, it was an uncomfortable situation for Brenna, particularly when we
because she wanted to play with her.
When we played with that couple. Not even that. I think it was really more than anything, it was the idea that the gal was so dismissive of Brenna's presence in the room that she paid her no attention at all, was almost like indifferent to her being there, which was really off-putting, I think, more than anything. Not that Brenna has to play with every woman that we encounter. It was just kind of more of it was just an attitude about the whole idea that she was even there, and while Brenna was with her husband, which was a very strange kind of, I thought, way to handle it, but it made for a very uncomfortable situation. And we really kind of exited that session pretty quickly because of it.
I think that I've heard that story on one of your episodes on Front Porch Swingers, your main podcast. But it's interesting to me that, like, it's almost like there was some jealousy there on the wife's part. Almost like, oh, you're playing with my husband? Like, I'm okay with it, but I'm not really okay with it. But
there's a lot going on in situations like that. I try not to get too far into people's heads. I just know that it was an uncomfortable situation for Brenna. She made it very clear in the middle of play. And I was enjoying myself because the woman was just a smoke show, and I was very attracted to her. She was really very attracted to me, which was nice. But I very quickly stopped because Brenna made it very clear that it wasn't working for her.
If one person is the least uncomfortable, it's time to get up out of yonder, as they would say over here.
Yeah, it doesn't do us any good. I mean, we do this because it brings us closer together, and what it really does to heighten our relationship. And if it's not mutually beneficial, then it's just no good for us.
And a lot of people don't understand that it brings you closer together. Like, how could fucking someone who's not your spouse bring you closer together? I mean, it's a fair question for those who have never experienced anything of the sort. It's a fair question. But
it is.
If you do your homework, you can figure out, like, communication gets a lot better and just so much more. Like, your sex life will get better, not just because you're sleeping with other people and having more sex, but between each other, it'll get better.
Right.
But so kind of getting back to the theme of this episode a little bit, and part of the reason why I didn't want to, bring you on the show right away, I didn't want you to feel like I was going to exploit you in any way. And the other thing is, like, I didn't want you, I figured you're probably answering all the questions a million times.
Sure.
And I didn't want you to have to feel like you had to with me until, now.
Right. That you're asking. So.
Right. So would you mind, for the 1,000,001th time, to kind of maybe give us a story about maybe how you came out, or like started to question, like, when did you first suspect, I guess, and all of that.
So, for me, it's been a period of time, years. This isn't a couple of weeks or a month. This is years of time that I've had, more time to reflect on who I am as a whole person. Early in my life, I don't think that the idea really, it wasn't really something I was giving any credence to, because I lived a very different lifestyle. And because I had, I dated a lot of women, I was very active with women for many, many years. It wasn't even something that had occurred to me. And I lived and worked in a place that was just full of masculine energy, in a space that was full of masculine energy. So it never really occurred to me that might even be something I was interested in, which was, having, spending time in, the company with another man. So it wasn't really something that had occurred to me until a few years back, particularly when Brenna and I got together and first met and really started talking about what our needs were, what our desires were, what we thought we were lacking in past relationships, and really just lacking in sexuality as a whole. And that conversation came up. I think Brenna asked me if I had those inclinations of, being bisexual or interested in sexes other than, or gender identifications other than, heteronormative women. And the answer was, yeah, it's something that had occurred to me a number of times. So as we began to grow our relationship and really kind of get into the space of ethical non-monogamy and swinging and, quote unquote swinging, that became much more front and center for me. So I had the opportunity, frankly, once again, it sounds cliche. I mean, you and I talk about it all the time. You have an amazing relationship, you and Kelly, as do myself and Brenna. And I feel terrible for people who don't share what Brenna and I share. Having the right partner and the right circumstance as your relationship is concerned, being able to really just be open with who you are and not afraid of being rejected or judged is huge. And that's really what made it happen for me.
Like, the idea of being able to be your true self, like regardless of judgment, I think is like a very, very empowering thing. Yeah. And honestly, like that, like Kelly knew I was bisexual before we, because we were fuck buddies at first. And so
sure,
like how, like our stories are different in that area. But I think like, cause I remember like early on, like I was asking Brenna, like how, she felt about you being bisexual. And it was almost like her responses were just, empowering towards you. And,
right.
and I think it just spoke volumes about the type of relationship and the strength of your relationship and foundation, just because it was like, I love him like no matter what. And if he wants to do that, fuck yeah, go do it. It was just very awesome to see.
Well, it's like anything else, right? If you genuinely, love and admire your partner, whatever they do, whether it's, sexual in nature or it's, occupational, it doesn't matter. If it's something that you do well, you succeed at it, you feel good about it, it makes you feel good about yourself, then certainly your partner who cares about you is not only going to be supportive, but certainly for me, Brenna's proactive. She's always positive about, any of the ideas that I have as it pertains to sexuality, particularly because we're open to just about any and all possibilities. And when I look back on my life prior to us getting into ethical non-monogamy and prior to Brenna and I having a relationship, my life could not be more different. I personally could not be more different. I still harbor some of the same old traits, that whole old dogs thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be possible for me to be where I am personally without that relationship.
I mean, like, I'm sure you've grown a lot because, I mean, you guys started out as you just wanted to be like a BDSM type of arrangement.
Correct.
Like a dub som and or a sub dom, not a.
Yes, you were close. I knew what you meant.
Yeah. I say things backwards all the time, like stuck in Foopid and like Thoughtcast pots,
Right.
Like, but anyway, like you guys started out in that dynamic, and then you just kind of realized, like, really quickly that you just wanted to talk to her and say, "Hey, how was your day?" Like you wanted it, like you kind of were growing to be best friends really quickly.
Yeah,
and
it happened
that's
quick.
kind of how Kelly and I started, was just fuck buddies, but then she never wanted me to leave. But in terms of like, because you'd mentioned that you guys started, or like early on in your conversations, she had asked you if you were bisexual, but like, had you had any experiences with a guy at that point?
No, not at that point. No. It was just something I knew. I knew that it was in me. I had that proclivity, but it wasn't anything that I had exercised to that point. But it was nice to know that I had a partner who was 100% supportive and on board with whatever I thought I needed, from a sexual perspective. And that really just kind of it changes how you look at everything, really, because then you start to question, like, why did I not do this sooner? Like, how did I just, how did I find myself in these terrible situations, prior? And I take 100% responsibility, 100% of the blame as it pertains to failed relationships in my past. I am 100% responsible for those things. And at least in my opinion, now I can look back and honestly say that for a number of reasons, not just the fact that I wasn't being honest from a sexual perspective, but, it really does open your eyes when you get that right relationship, like the one I have with Brenna. It opens your eyes to just about everything that you did that was just a terrible fucking decision. Like that was just a bad plan. Why did you continue to do that?
Yeah, it really does. Because the other thing is, I found myself kind of asking, like, what did I do to deserve Kelly? Because this is fucking awesome. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. For me, I knew I had to go through a whole lot of, I had to make a lot of mistakes, had to, make some terrible fucking decisions. It took me long enough, but finally it's here. So, good for me. Good for us.
So your first experience, it obviously came more recently than not, I would imagine, because you just came out. Like, before the podcast came out, when did you start dating men or going on dates with men and kind of exploring that to kind of maybe figure out? Because I think I also heard in the podcast that you went to like a bisexual themed party, or
no, not exactly. So I was talking with guys for probably the past year, kind of, playing with the idea of maybe dating someone new, in terms of a man. So I, like anything else, I'm super analytical, and I have very different tastes as it pertains to, different sexes. And so I didn't really know what I was looking for. I wasn't 100% sure. I was attracted to certain qualities and then not attracted to other qualities, that kind of thing. And I had had the opportunity to meet a gentleman who is also a bisexual man. He's a married man also, lives in our town, very, very successful guy. I met him actually through work. And somehow, for whatever reason, and he's very open, he has an open relationship with his partner. He asked me if, I was bisexual. It just happened to come up in conversation. Just two guys talking. We got very comfortable having a conversation, and there was no attraction between the two of us. It wasn't a physical attraction. And he said, listen, I'm having a birthday party for a friend of mine. Most of the people at this event will be either, gay, bisexual, transgendered, whatever, it's anything and everything. But he had rented a place that's really very beautiful not too far away from where we live, about 40 minutes out, and asked if I would attend. I had never been to anything like it before, and certainly didn't know anybody. It was just him. And Brenna, again, is the one that convinced me that I should go. I'm not a party guy anyway. Like, I'm the host of parties. I've done that my entire life. I'm not really the guy that attends parties, So it's difficult for me to interact in that capacity. I'm the best host. I'm the worst guest, So I'm just the absolute worst guest.
Actually, we're not even good hosts. We're not even good guests or hosts.
I'm a great host. You want me to host your event, 100%. You just don't want me to attend the goddamn thing.
The two times Kelly and I hosted a party, this was before we started swinging. We shut it down early because Kelly wanted to go to the bar.
Then, there you go.
We're also the kind of people that stand in the corner because we have no fucking idea what to do with our hands.
Right.
Which I think going out my freshman year with the college basketball team that I was attending kind of fucked that over for me, because I went out with them one time and they just stood in the corner. And then I think that's just it stuck. No fucking clue what to do.
Yeah, like I said, I don't do the guest thing well. But Brenna convinced me I should go. She said, no, you absolutely should go and interact and get to know some of these people. And what I found interesting, the main reason I think that I really went was because where we live, it's very closed off. People here are, it's very underground. The sexuality space is very underground. And unfortunately, even the bisexual and gay community here is not as active as you'd like to think it would be in what would be presumably a very progressive place, unfortunately. And these were all people who were very much open and out about who they were. And I just wanted to interact with people like that. That's who I wanted to be around. So I did. I went, and it was probably about 30 folks, probably 50% male, 50% female, very comfortable. Everybody was super friendly, just a really nice event. And I got to meet a number of people that I still communicate with, just as, as friends, we just communicate. And it's nice to be able to talk to other guys in my situation. They are coupled, they have partners, they are open, they are very clear about who they are from a sexual perspective. And it's just refreshing. having to be or thinking that you have to be on all the time, you have to be in character all the time, or be really guarded about, how you behave or what you say. And that shit gets exhausting. It's just nice to be around people who don't give a shit. And those are the people whose company that Brenna and I seek.
Same, because again, it kind of goes back to the being able to be your true 100% authentic self. Those are the types of people that I also find myself wanting to be around more. I mean, even if it's like family, I just told my mom, hey, Mom, we have a sex-based podcast, because I also have another podcast that's kind of more dead in the water at this point, just because.
Thanks, COVID.
No, it was more of like, I found myself doing all the work with a co-host. And not to say, like, this co-host, anytime I asked him to do something, he would do it. So it wasn't like he was lazy. It's just, I think I knew how to do more than he did. So therefore, I did more than he did.
Yeah, not quite an equal partnership kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I asked him to take over the editing because honestly, like, editing, it got to the point where all I did was I would get up, go to work here in this office. Yeah. I would stay after work in this office after walking the dogs, and I would edit podcasts 7 days a week. And then I'd go to bed, and I would just do the same thing for 7 days a week. And I was like, I got to do something. My work-life balance is off. I have no time for myself, nothing.
Yeah.
And so I asked him to help out with the editing. He's like, fuck yeah, I'll do it. I'll watch some tutorials. I even like bought some stuff to help him. I mean, we're good friends. It's not like this ruined our friendship by any means, but we haven't put out an episode since I asked him to do it, and I'm okay with it. But anyway, like, I just told my mom because I didn't want to hide anything from her.
Right.
Because we have some podcast stuff coming up that, is pretty big. And so, like, I didn't want to, like, hide that from her. And I wanted to tell her the reason why they were coming up, because they're big events. And so I didn't want to hide that from her. Now, I told her that we have, like, it's a sex-based podcast. And the relationship I have with my mom is pretty fucking unique. Like, I'll call her up and I'll be like, what's up, bitch? And she'll be like, what's happening? You know what I'm saying?
That's unique.
But yeah, like one time she told me she found out the hard way, no pun intended, that her gag reflexes still work.
That is not a conversation I'm trying to have with my mom.
It wasn't one that I wanted either, trust me. But my point is like, even through that, like, I felt like I could still be, more myself with her than my own dad, who they're divorced and remarried. But even like after I told my mom that I have a sex-based podcast, there was still a long pause. But if I were to tell my dad that, he'd be like, son, you need Jesus, you need to go to church, you need to do all these other things. And like, Kelly and I are not religious. We don't buy into that stuff. It's not for us. No judgment, though, if you are. I know you guys probably aren't, but
we are not.
Well, it's just, my whole point is like, being able to be your true self is like, those are the types of people that we want to surround ourselves with, because like, even though like our like swinger group that we're a part of, we're probably leaning more on like the level of like not wanting to play with any of them.
Right.
And part of that is because just attraction levels aren't fully there for everyone. And they're all just amazing people. And it's all like, essentially, with the exception of like a few, there's no judgment. And they all know I'm bisexual. And it's just so awesome to be surrounded in that environment. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, this is the situation that I found myself in at this event, at this moment, really just a gathering of people, was very comfortable. There was no pressure of any kind about whether or not you were or weren't attracted to people in this room. No one cared. No one asked. If you were, you were, I suppose. It just never came up. It was just nice to be around people who were comfortable in their own skin and comfortable around others in their own skin. It was really, it was refreshing, not like anything I'd ever really experienced before.
Which is strange because we're in a space that is open and open-minded and non-judgmental. And I'm using air quotes for those of you who can't see.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I go back and forth with this, with Brenna, and I go back and forth about it. Me particularly, I struggle with some of it. We're in a space that should be, for the most part, as much as any space can be, inclusive, and understanding and non-judgmental about anything, about a lot of things, anything. And that is rarely the case. I liken this space a lot of times to high school. You are either part of the in crowd or you're not, It's really just that way. And it's kind of like when, Brenna and I talked a long time ago, the very first event we ever went to. The minute I walked into that room, which was fucking depressing anyway, it was obvious that like you could correlate it back to your high school days. Like the chess club was on one side of the room and the jocks and the cheerleaders were on the other side. And it just was so divisive to me. I was so uncomfortable there. And this space a lot of times makes me feel that way. And it bothers me. It's depressing. It's like, we've decided that in everything that we have going on, obviously coming up in 21, as you know, we are simply not going to entertain folks that are negative or in any way judgmental or have just an outlook that isn't in alignment with ours. If you're not positive and you don't want to move forward in this space productively and really make a difference, we're not going to fuck with you,
Well, that's the thing is like so much of society is like they're open-minded everyone is open-minded to a point, right?
Until something affects them or until they feel like they've been wronged in some way or frankly, if someone doesn't agree with them or they don't agree with something,
right?
It's
that's the
bullshit.
Thing is like in the sexual sphere, whatever. Where does that? I don't understand how you're okay with me liking feet. Okay, cool. You're okay with me wanting to be tied up a little bit. Okay, cool. You're okay with me being pegged? Maybe not so much. Oh, okay. I like dick. No, get the fuck out. That is not okay.
Right.
How does that line get drawn? Like, I don't get it. We were talking earlier, you and Clint, Brenna's play partner of probably a year or a little bit longer.
2.5 years now. Yeah, 2 years.
Right. But like you guys DP'd Brenna and your balls are fucking clinging together. Most guys would be like, fuck no, don't even touch me. Like, no male contact, please. You know how many times I've seen that shit in bios?
With that? If you have a problem touching fucking, he and I, our legs were rubbing together. And if you have a problem with that, then you're simply not going to be fucking a woman together. You're not going to be, double teaming a woman or, DPing a woman. You're just going to have to figure something else out. If that's a hang up for you, you're in the wrong fucking space.
I agree. Like, you're going to tell me you're not going to kiss your wife after she sucks someone else's dick and she's like trying to make love to you? No, you're going to fucking do it. But you're not okay with like, someone accidentally touching your shoulder in a
innocuously touching. Get the fuck out of here! I have no conversation for that.
I mean,
it's so weird.
I don't know how you could go to a swinger party and not see a cock. I don't get it.
I don't either. Yeah. Well, first of all, I come from a sports background, athletics my entire life. I spent a lot of time in fucking locker rooms and on wrestling mats and in martial arts studios and jiu-jitsu class. And you're rolling around with dudes. I've rolled around with guys most of my fucking life. So the idea that, innocuously touching some guy while you're both banging your significant other is a fucking problem, I find a little bit ridiculous.
And that kind of leads to, how like on the football field or the baseball field, like it's not uncommon for a coach or a teammate to smack your ass, like saying, hey, good job there, 42.
Yeah.
That's okay. But me touching you on the shoulder accidentally during
because we're naked, right?
Sex.
It's different because we're naked and, and there's somebody else in the room, I guess.
Man, my freshman fucking year of high school, I saw a couple of teammates in the shower. There were no stalls in the team showers.
Right.
And I saw one teammate like lift up another guy's penis, like almost like in an inspection type of way. And like they all like grossed out by it. I mean, I probably wouldn't have, the guy like was kind of gross, not looking, but like mannerisms and how he carried himself. But then, little couple of lockers down from mine, the third string quarterback was just sitting there chilling naked.
Yeah.
I don't understand how one is okay, but in a different situation, it's not okay. It's almost like saying you can be yourself, but just not in other scenarios. Like
it's that whole thing, be yourself, just don't be yourself around me kind of bullshit.
As long as it doesn't affect me.
Yeah. It's crazy. I don't get it. And it's one of the things about again, I'll use air quotes, the swinger-centric space, not even the ethically non-monogamous space so much, but the swinger-centric space. It's such an issue for people when it comes to male sexuality. Like everyone just has hang-ups about it. I honestly don't get it. I think a lot of it has to do with confusion. A lot of people are confused themselves. I just read an article. I'll share it with you. I'll be lying to tell you the author. Scientific research shows now that they're saying essentially 60% of people are inherently bisexual by nature. Over 60%, which frankly, I think might even be low. I don't know. But I just think it's so strange.
Going back to ancient times, the Romans and the Greeks, like it was not uncommon for male play back during those times. Like that's, sure. I think that might be like kind of widely known a little bit.
100%.
But it's natural. I mean, there is a G spot in my booty hole, like, and yours too.
Well, yeah, Roman orgies were a thing for a reason. You're not going to, there was a whole lot of touching going on. Good luck trying to figure out whose hand is where.
I mean, I think for me, like, it just boils down, like the whole thing is like, I just enjoy sex. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I care to a point like who it's with. You know, I'm not going to go fuck just anyone. You know, there has to be like a level of attraction and like guidelines have, or like things have to be met, like, you know, not being a family member.
Yeah.
And among a lot of other things, you know, recent STD check. Anyway, but I'm attracted to a lot of different people. But more importantly, I just enjoy sex. Like I enjoy being around it. And I think that's why I enjoy having this podcast so much, is just because I love being in that environment, whether I'm participating in some way or not. It doesn't matter. I just enjoy it because I feel like I'm myself, because I'm a very sexually oriented person. Like that's just who I am. And that kind of like, it's freeing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's just being able to be yourself around people who understand and are not judgmental of who you are because they themselves behave the same way. They're comfortable in their own skin and kind of do their own thing. I've just decided that we are simply not going to be around people who don't get it. It's exhausting, really, for me to try to get someone over to my way of thinking. I used to think for a long time that I had to convince people that their way of thinking was absolutely insane because you didn't align with the way I thought, particularly as it pertains to sex and sexuality and gender identification, all those things. And I am just done doing that. Like, I'm not going to try to, if you don't want to understand where I'm coming from, if you genuinely have an interest and I want to talk to you about it, if you don't have an interest or you feel like this is, you know, this conversation just isn't for you, then I'm not going to burn the calories trying to figure it out.
So we kind of talked a little bit about this before the recording, but what types of individuals are you attracted to? Because for me, I'm more attracted to the more feminine type of individual in terms of looks. But I will say the individuals that try too hard to be something they're not, and by that I mean like the very obvious fake tan or like spray tan or something like that. I don't like those, and that's what I mean by they try too hard to be something they're not.
Sure.
I'm not into that. But what types of individuals are you attracted to, not attracted to?
It's interesting. Maybe years ago, some people that know me best would have said that I had a particular type, obviously as it pertained to women. I don't think that's the case anymore. I've determined about myself that the experience is really far more important than the appearance, someone's appearance, outward appearance. Of course, there has to be a general attraction. I think that's pretty natural for people. But what I have found, at least as I've gotten older and as Brenna and I have kind of continued, I should say, the journey that we're on, it's become very evident to me that chemistry is far more important. Someone's energy is far more important to me, and they become more attractive to me as I begin to connect with them and really enjoy their company. I don't know that I have a particular type. I am more attracted as it pertains to men, let's say. You know, I'm not necessarily attracted to super feminine people in general. I like a little bit more of a harder edge, a little more masculine energy, I guess you might say. So age appropriate, really, for me. I'm attracted more of drop older, I guess. So really nothing physical. There really isn't a physical thing. I'm fortunate, as you and I mentioned earlier, I am seeing someone who is super attractive. It's almost hard to believe, actually, that he has any interest in me at all. But that was not by design. He's just amazing person, really. Just enjoy his company. You know, we'll meet for coffee just, you know, more often than anything else and just sit and bullshit. You know, it's very comfortable.
I can relate to that because for me, if you can be the most attractive person in the world, but if you have a shit personality, I'm not into you. So like, I can totally relate to you on that one.
Yeah, I have no use for that at all. If you're, people who just rub me the wrong way, I go right past what you look like. I simply don't care. It doesn't matter. You know, and a lot of that, again, listen, a lot of it has to do with me, with personal growth. I will absolutely tell you that in years past, I was totally judgmental of people for various reasons. I was superficial like anybody else and was only attracted to the physical and didn't really care too much about anything else. Those things change. And again, I will credit my relationship with Brenna to those things because this relationship has made me think of things and look at things differently. You know, certainly more empathetic toward people and situations than I've ever been before. And it just kind of, it opens your eyes a little bit. It certainly did to me. So optically, things have changed for me drastically when I think about other people and how I want to interact with them or with whom I want to interact.
So you've got a regular play partner. You've got a few, it seems like, which is, probably this time last year, we wouldn't have thought of that happening because I think early on, probably for the last while, it's mostly been Brenna that's been playing or at least by herself.
Yeah. And we just talked about that yesterday, actually. I think we actually even even touched on it on the show, on the new episode. You know, again, a year ago, if you'd have told me that we were going to end up being kind of a poly couple and we were going to venture off in that space, or that I would have a regular playmate, in any way, shape, or form, I simply wouldn't have believed it, because I just didn't see myself being able to do that at that particular time. Now, of course, things changed. I mean, 100%. We are very much accepting of the fact that we have the ability and the capacity to be polyamorous and have multiple partners and relationships, and true relationships, really spending time with other people and dating and doing all those things. And we've been very fortunate, really our entire journey of ethical non-monogamy, that we have had the ability to spend time with regular play partners and who have become friends, genuine friends, that we honestly are, they're the people and the things we're going to miss most when we leave, not being able to spend time with them and see them regularly for no other reason, as I said, to meet for a cup of coffee or for lunch or a drink, out, or of course, no more concerts at this point, but we would meet friends out for concerts and live music and that kind of thing. So I think that's the part we're going to miss the most. And ironically, they're the people that we have connected with on at the beginning, certainly for sexual reasons. And they've just become great friends. But we've been very fortunate. I mean, those of you who listen to our show know we have a lot of the same characters who we talk about on our show, because we see them often. And we like the idea that we have formed those relationships. Not that we're against the one-off kind of concept, but it's not our preference for sure. We really genuinely enjoy the connection. For us, it's the most important thing.
I think that's one thing where kind of like reminds me of why I like Front Porch Swingers and Brian and Brenna, you guys behind it, because I feel like I can relate to you guys on so many levels. Like what you're saying right there about how the sex is a great cherry on top. Don't get me wrong. But the friendships that you make from it, like they're unexpected, but it is very much the preference.
100%.
And it's kind of crazy how, banging someone else's spouse can also like make you guys friends.
Yeah.
Like
I was talking to a friend of mine today, and I have friends that have been my friends for the better part of 30 years. We worked together and essentially grew up as adults together. And while I spoke to a friend of mine today, and while he, of course, understands who I am now and where I am, it was important to me a while back to make clear to the people that mattered the most to me, letting them know who I was now compared, who it was that you knew, many years ago. And I really wanted their genuine reaction. And of course, because we live so far away, there's virtually no way to do it face to face. So being able to read them while you're talking to them on the phone and, and Skyping and that kind of thing, I was genuinely surprised, in a good way, that I was accepted by the people that matter most to me, based on what Brenna and I are doing. And of course, completely changing our lives. And of course, we have a sexuality-based podcast, and where my sexuality is and Brenna's sexuality, all those things, where our relationship is. And it was nice to be able to get, I don't want to say, the approval from friends, but certainly the understanding and compassion and, the genuine, they don't give a shit about, any of that, just as long as you're happy kind of thing. It was really kind of nice. However, there are certainly things I will talk about with our lifestyle friends that I wouldn't necessarily talk to my lifelong friends about. They're very vanilla. It's not a situation where any of them find themselves in ethically non-monogamous, situation, certainly. So I really wouldn't do it, because I wouldn't want to make them uncomfortable. And there's no point. It's not like they're going to have a frame of reference or really understand where I'm coming from. So having conversations about that wouldn't make any sense. So it's kind of nice to have those lifestyle friends who understand you, people who are like-minded in that way. And you can just speak openly and cogently and very clearly about what it is that's on your mind.
Yeah. And those friends are, again, the ones that you can really be your true self with. I mean, I don't want to go out and say like they're going to be your better friends, but it definitely makes it easier to be yourself. And whether that's, sure, getting advice from them or just, sharing a meme that your vanilla friends would never understand.
Yeah, or not one in their inbox.
Right, whichever. Exactly. Whether it's like a vanilla sex meme or if it's like a swinger meme or whatever, it doesn't matter. The fact is like, I mean, it kind of comes down to know your audience, right? But at the same time, the people that you find yourself gravitating towards, sharing everything that you want to share with, it's just a powerful relationship that's there for you.
Well, I look at it this way, and I actually said this to Brenna today, because as I said, I spoke to a friend of mine who's been my friend for many, many years, and we're going to see him on our journey as we start traveling. And I said to her, I said, how he and I met and came to become friends through work was a very strange kind of connection anyway. The people that knew us never expected us to be friends. They actually expected us to be at each other's throats. And we have become lifelong friends. He's one of the closest people to me in life. However, today, as I the person I am today, for me to tell you that if I had met him today, that we would become lifelong friends, I would tell you I probably wouldn't. That wouldn't be the case because we have so little in common as it pertains to where I am now as a person. However, we have shared so much over the course of such a long period of time, shared a lot, been through a lot, seen a lot together. I could never discount those things. And this is a person that, I could call for anything. If I had a flat tire here in Montana, he'd come from Texas to help me change it. So yeah, listen, you have to have people like that in your life, right? I mean, if you got to move a body, I know he's going to show up with a shovel. I could just call him and tell him to bring a shovel. He won't even ask me why. So those are the kind of people that are really, that matter the most to me. And I have a few of those in my life. However, the lifestyle friends, the people you meet because of your life and ethical non-monogamy or whatever the case may be, they're different, right? You can confide differently in them and you can feel a level of comfort in talking to them and sharing things with them and knowing that you're not being met with judgment. There's no disdain for what you're saying. They're not going to question you in any way. They're just going to accept what it is that you're saying, be understanding and potentially helpful, which is just great, and at the same time, you don't have to, for me, I look at it like I don't want to burden my vanilla friends with any of this bullshit. You know what I mean? That's not where our friendship is, and it doesn't have to be. And I just don't want to put them in awkward situations.
So I don't know if you were alluding to it or not, but you brought it up in my mind, and that is kind of just because they are your swinger friends or your sex positive friends, and you can confine in them in a lot of things that you can with your vanilla friends. Just because you can do that with them doesn't necessarily mean if you need to move a body that they will be there. Right. But if you need to talk about the swinger things, they'll be there for you. When your vanilla friends or whatever may not necessarily be able to help you out there. So it's almost like You've got to use, this is going to sound really bad, but you got to use your friends for what they're there for, like their purpose in your life. You have to be able to use them for that purpose, right?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be a little bit more like you have to appreciate them for who they are and where they are, sure, and how you honestly benefit each other and make each other's lives better. For my friends that, as I said, I've had for the largest portion of my life, who are lifelong friends of mine, there are things, of course, that I have shared with them that I will never be able to share with anyone else, and experiences. And, that just, it lends itself to a deeper understanding of each other and a compassion for each other, obviously, and certainly an appreciation. However, that appreciation is different with your lifestyle friends, your sex positive friends. And while my lifelong friends would be understanding potentially and listen to what I had to say if I were talking to them about a situation that I felt strongly about from a sexual perspective, I don't know that they could lend me any real advice or really understand fully. I felt like it would just be exercise talking to them about it. So why not speak to people who genuinely get it, who may very likely have gone through it themselves and have a unique, kind of outlook on it and be able to lend something to that conversation. I think my lifelong friends would simply be lending an ear and allowing me to vent, probably.
I think that you're 112% right on the mark right there. You've got to kind of like pick and choose like who you tell what, because you can still be yourself around your friends that know that you're open and all these other things, but they're not. But, they don't necessarily need to hear, so I was going down on this guy the other day and I just don't think he was appreciating it or whatever.
Right.
Whereas like with your lifestyle friends or whatever, you'd be able to say, oh yeah, so I was going down on this guy and like I was stroking his shaft and I was cupping the balls and but I just don't think he was appreciating it, guys. What do you think maybe I could do? Like, it's just two different worlds you're living in, I guess. But
well, I'll liken it to this. So one of my friends, who again has been my friend for so many years, I really don't even know how many at this point. He's a religious guy. He comes from a very religious background. He's devout in his belief. He doesn't preach to me. We don't have religious conversations. He knows where I stand from a religious perspective. So we simply don't have those conversations. And so I don't need to have a conversation with him about ethical non-monogamy or sex positivity. He has a very vanilla life. He is a monogamous guy. No reason to go down that road with him, any more than there is for him to to talk to me about his religious belief.
So that's going to do it for this week's episode and part 1 of the 2-part interview. Next week's episode will be the second part of the interview, and it will be out on Friday. In the meantime, you can go to fullswapshop.com, where you can buy our merch and Brian and Brenna's merch from Front Porch Swingers. Check them out. They are an amazing podcast. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And also don't forget to join our community on altplayground.net. They are an amazing company, and we love working with them. So check that out as well. You get, I believe it's 3 days for $3.99 or something along those lines. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at TNR Podcasts. That is plural. And so, yeah, thank you so much, and be on the lookout for next week's episode.